a very brief homily and introduction to our Passion Sunday reading. How many of you have seen people on the side of the road holding up a sign that says, "Jesus loves you"? Raise your hand. How many of you would ever articulate and say that you love Jesus? Raise your hand. That's not often a language a phrase we use as mainline Protestants. We often experience faith more through our mind, through our intellects, and we don't always talk about the emotional side of faith. There is something very beautiful about being able to say that you love Jesus, that you want to follow him, and that you have a sense of connection to him. But that can be difficult sometimes, especially because as I looked back on our previous Palm Passion Sundays, quite often when we do these readings, we are the ones who are shouting, "Crucify him," right? Because it's important for us to understand how we had a part in the death of Jesus. The Jews didn't kill Jesus, right? It is human sin and corruption that we take down and we kill people like Jesus, right? The humble, the kind-hearted, the folks who use their power in very soft and collaborative ways. People like that sometimes make us feel a little uncomfortable. But you all are here because you understand that that is the teaching of Jesus, right? He's not a bully. He was never a bully. He had the heart of God, as our Philippians reading said. He understood the power of humility. And so as we read the Passion Sunday today, the Passion Sunday readings, you're going to notice that your script, as the congregation, you will be speaking the words of Jesus in his part of his last 7 days of his life. Because as Philippians says, as Paul said so beautifully, it is important for us to understand the mind of Christ, to understand the depth of what he did, the power of how he lived his life. A man of deep compassion, of deep empathy. As we learned on Wednesday night from Ethan, who gave his faith story, quite often in our world, we think compassion has a limited source. Jesus reminds us compassion has no end and encourages us to live that way too. And in a time in our world where we're seeing power grabs and people using their power over others, Jesus reminds us to share power, to look and side ourselves with the hurting and the suffering. And so as you take part in the Passion Story reading today, I encourage you to think and discern the mind of Jesus. Get into his shoes or sandals and try to get a different perspective, a deeper understanding of who Jesus is and was. I'd like to invite our three readers to come up. I'm so grateful for their time this morning. We have Cammie and Lisa and Lois. If you don't have a script in your hand, can you please raise your hand so I can get you one? Okay. Todd and I will get you some scripts. Thanks, Drew. And so let us enter into the story of Palm Passion Sunday.
Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I betray him to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. On the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where do you want us to make the preparations for you to eat the Passover?" He said,
"Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'Jesus says, the time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'"
So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said,
And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him one after another, "Surely not I, Lord." Jesus answered,
Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." He replied,
"You have said so."
While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said,
"Take, eat, this is my body." And he took a cup. Will never again.
When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them,
Peter said to him, "Though all become deserters because of you, I will never desert you." Jesus said to him,
Peter said to him, "Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And so said all the disciples. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples,
I don't have my script. He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them,
and going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed.
Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter,
Again, he went away for the second time and prayed.
Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them,
While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him,
Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly, one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds,
Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the scribes and the elders had gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to Jesus, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to him,
Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and struck him. And some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you?"
Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before all of them, saying, "I do not know what you are talking about." When he went out to the porch, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders came by and said to Peter, "Certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know the man." At that moment, the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly.
When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas the betrayer saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. He said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." But they said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since they are blood money." After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me.
Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said,
But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed.
Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." Then the people as a whole answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified.
The word of the Lord.